In my previous life, the sharp metallic click of a luxury pen was the sound of my execution. It signaled a stolen future, a reputation burned to ash, and my family's ultimate humiliation. Back then, Minna Carmichael, armed with doe eyes and a perfect smile, had handed me a Trojan horse disguised as a good luck charm. I died a broken man, taking the fall for a cheating scandal I had absolutely no part in. But upon opening my eyes now, I stared at a digital clock reading May 13th. I had woken up 24 hours before the National Merit Exam. I was back, and this time, the executioner's block was reserved for her. The first thing I noticed was the smell of rain hitting the hot asphalt outside my window. The second was the rhythmic, relentless ticking of the analog clock on my nightstand. I bolted upright, my chest heaving, lungs clawing for air as if I had just breached the surface of a frozen lake. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, reached up to touch my face. No scars, no grease from the auto shop I had been forced to work at. My fingers traced the smooth, unblemished skin of an 18-year-old. I threw off the heavy duvet and stumbled toward the mirror mounted on the back of my closet door. Sitting back at me was Arthur Pendleton, not the hollowed-out, disgraced 25-year-old who had driven his beat-up sedan off an icy bridge in a moment of absolute despair, but the bright-eyed, naive high school senior. I snatched my phone from the desk. May 13th, 2026, 6 a.m. A strangled laugh clawed its way out of my throat, harsh and bordering on hysterical. It was real. The universe, in some rare act of cosmic pity, had hit the rewind button. I collapsed onto the edge of my bed, the memories of my first life rushing back with the violence of a breaking dam. Tomorrow was the National Merit Exam. At Oak Ridge Academy, this test wasn't just a metric. It was the sole arbiter of our futures. It dictated university placements, decided who got the heavily endowed alumni scholarships, and crowned the class valedictorian. For 3 years, it had been a neck-and-neck race between me and Minna Carmichael. Minna, just thinking her name, made a phantom ache bloom behind my ribs. To the rest of the school, she was the undisputed queen of Oak Ridge. Wealthy, stunningly beautiful with her cascading blonde hair and pristine designer uniforms, and possessing a sickly sweet demeanor that charmed teachers and students alike. But beneath that flawless veneer was a ruthless, calculating apex predator. She didn't just want a win. She needed to obliterate the competition, and I was the only competition left. In my previous life, on the morning of May 14th, she had approached me in the hallway, her eyes shimmering with what I thought was genuine camaraderie. She handed me a sleek, silver Montblanc pen, a Truce Arthur. She had whispered, her voice like spun sugar, "For good luck, may the best scholar win." I had been stupid enough, flattered enough to accept it. 50 minutes into the exam, Mr. Harrison, the notoriously draconian invigilator, had marched directly down the aisle, stopping at my desk. Without a word, he snatched the Montblanc from my grip. He twisted the barrel exactly 45 degrees. The seemingly solid, silver casing shifted, revealing a microscopic, high-resolution, e-ink display seamlessly integrated into the design. On that screen, scrolling in tiny, glowing text, were the answers to the exam's most complex formulas. I was dragged out of the hall in front of 300 staring peers. The expulsion was swift. My Ivy League acceptances were immediately revoked. The local papers ran the story, "The Golden Boy Caught Cheating." My father, a proud man who had worked double shifts to afford my Oak Ridge tuition, couldn't look me in the eye. The shame broke my mother's heart. My life spiraled into a bleak, unforgiving abyss, culminating in that icy, fatal drive. And Minna took valedictorian, gave a tearful speech about integrity, and went on to Stanford. The digital numbers on my clock shifted to 6:05 a.m. The despair of my past life evaporated, replaced by a cold, hyper-focused rage. I knew exactly how the rigged pen worked. It was a custom-made marvel of cheating technology, completely undetectable unless you knew the exact angle to twist the barrel. She had given it to me, then tipped off Mr. Fitty Non Harrison via an anonymous email sent from a burner phone just as the exam began. If she wanted to play a game of shadows, I was going to rewrite the rules. I had 24 hours. Getting out of bed, I dressed quickly in street clothes. I checked my savings, a meager $800 saved from summer tutoring gigs. It was enough. I slipped out of the house before my parents woke up and caught a bus to the commercial district downtown. I waited outside Sterling Stationers, until the owner unlocked the doors at 9 a.m. Walking in, I bypassed the aisles of notebooks and went straight to the glass display cases in the back. "I need a Montblanc Meisterstück Classic," I told the clerk. My voice startlingly steady, silver trim, black resin. It was an exact replica of the shell she had used to house her technological Trojan horse. It cost me nearly every cent I had, but as I walked out of the store clutching the velvet box, I felt nothing but a dark, creeping satisfaction. The trap was set. Now, I just needed to invite the hunter in. The morning of May 14th dawned gray and oppressive, the air thick with the humidity of an impending thunderstorm. The tension in the halls of Oak Ridge Academy was thick enough to choke on. Students were huddled in corners, furiously cramming flashcards, their faces pale with anxiety. "I'm going to throw up," Leo Bennett muttered, leaning against his locker next to mine. My best friend looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "I swear to God, Arthur, if there's a section on advanced organic synthesis, I'm just going to write my own obituary on the Scantron." I clapped him on the shoulder, offering a reassuring smile that felt foreign on my face. "You'll be fine, Leo. Just breathe. Stick to what we reviewed. Easy for you to say." He groaned. "You and Minna are the only ones actually competing today. The rest of us are just fighting for scraps." Speak of the devil. The crowd near the water fountain parted like the Red Sea, and there she was, Minna Carmichael. She looked immaculate, as always. Her uniform skirt was perfectly pleated, her blouse crisp, and her hair fell in loose, flawless waves over her shoulders. She was projecting an aura of calm confidence, but knowing what I knew now, I could see the micro-expressions of tension tightening the corners of her mouth. She caught my eye, and her lips curved into a dazzling, practiced smile. She broke away from her sycophantic entourage and glided toward us. "Arthur," she breathed, her voice carrying that melodic, breathy quality she used to disarm people. "Leo, hey, Minna," Leo mumbled, intimidated as always. She turned her full, mesmerizing attention to me. "I was hoping I'd catch you before homeroom. Do you have a second?" "Of course," I replied, forcing my facial muscles to convey polite curiosity. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to push her away to expose her right here in the hallway. But I needed the long game. I needed the kill shot to be public, undeniable, and utterly devastating. She reached into her pristine leather tote bag and pulled out a slim velvet box. My heart gave a heavy, rhythmic thud. Here it was, the instrument of my previous destruction. "I know things have been intensely competitive between us this year," Minna said, her eyes wide and entirely convincing. She looked like the absolute picture of sporting grace, but I've always respected you, Arthur. You pushed me to be better. I wanted to give you this. A truce for good luck. She pressed the box into my hands. "Minna, this is." I opened the box, feigning shock as I looked down at the silver and black Montblanc. "This is incredibly generous." "Too generous?" "Nonsense." She insisted softly, placing a warm hand on my forearm. The contact made my skin crawl. "Consider it a graduation gift. May the best scholar win today. May the best scholar win." I echoed, my voice smooth, hiding the absolute venom pooling in my throat. She gave me one last lingering smile before turning and walking away. I watched her go, my grip tightening on the velvet box until my knuckles turned white. "Wow," Leo whispered, staring after her. "Maybe she's not the ice queen everyone says she is." "Maybe," I said softly. The first bell rang, signaling the start of homeroom. We had 45 minutes before we were required to line up outside the gymnasium for the exam. This was my window. I entered the homeroom classroom. Minna was already there, sitting in the front row, holding court with a few other students. Her leather tote bag and her clear regulation exam pencil pouch were resting on her desk. Inside the clear pouch were 2 standard yellow pencils and eraser, and crucially a black resin Montblanc pen. Her pen, I took my seat in the back. I had the velvet box containing the rigged pen in my pocket. Beside it, unboxed, was the identical, completely normal Montblanc I had purchased yesterday. 15 minutes into homeroom, the opportunity presented itself. Mr. Harrison, our homeroom teacher and the chief invigilator, stepped out into the hallway to speak with the principal. Minna immediately stood up, smoothing her skirt, and moved toward the back of the room to chat with a group of girls, leaving her desk entirely unattended. I stood up, holding a piece of scrap paper, and began walking toward the front of the room, pretending to head for the recycling bin near Mr. Harrison's desk. The classroom was buzzing with nervous chatter. No one was looking at me. I was the quiet, studious kid. I was practically invisible when I wasn't answering a math equation. As I passed Minna's desk, I dropped my scrap paper. I bent down to retrieve it. In one fluid, practiced motion, a sleight of hand I had rehearsed in my bedroom for 3 hours last night. My hand darted to her desk. I pumped her Montblanc from her open, clear pouch, swapped it with the rigged pen from my pocket, and slid the rigged pen exactly where hers had been. The entire exchange took less than 2 seconds. I stood up, dropped my paper in the bin, and turned around. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. As I walked back down the aisle, my eyes met those of Sarah Jenkins, a quiet, hyper-observant girl who sat 1 row behind Minna. Sarah was looking directly at me. Her dark eyes were unreadable behind her wire-rimmed glasses. She glanced from me, down to Minna's clear pouch, and back to me. My breath caught. If she said something, it was over. The plan was dead. For a terrifying, agonizing moment, the air between us seemed to freeze. Then, very slowly, Sarah lowered her eyes back to her textbook and turned the page. A silent, imperceptible nod. She had seen, and she wasn't going to say a word. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had suffered under Minna's reign. I sat back down, sliding Minna's unrigged, perfectly normal pen into my pocket next to my own purchased replica. I now had 2 normal pens. Minna had the Trojan horse. A few minutes later, Mr. Harrison re-entered the room. He clapped his hands, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "All right, seniors," he barked, his eyes scanning the room with his usual predatory gleam. "Time's up. Leave your bags here. Take only your clear exam pouches and your ID. Proceed to the gymnasium in absolute silence." Minna walked past my desk, her clear pouch in hand. I could see the silver clip of the rigged pen catching the fluorescent light. She looked at me and gave a small, encouraging nod. I nodded back. "See you in the slaughterhouse, Minna." The Oak Ridge Gymnasium had been transformed into a sterile, terrifying coliseum. 300 individual desks were spaced exactly 4 feet apart in a massive grid across the polished wooden floor. The air conditioning was cranked up to a freezing temperature, meant to keep us alert, but it only added to the clinical, morgue-like atmosphere. The only sounds were the hum of the overhead vents and the synchronized ticking of 3 massive digital clocks mounted on the walls. I found my assigned seat, row G, seat 14. I sat down, placing my clear plastic pouch on the desk. Inside were 2 yellow pencils and the normal Montblanc I had bought yesterday. I looked up to find Minna. She was in row E, seat 12, 2 rows ahead of me, slightly to the left. The positioning was almost poetic. It gave me an unobstructed, perfect view of her profile and her desk. Mr. Harrison and a team of proctors began distributing the thick, sealed exam booklets. "You have exactly 3 hours, Mr. Harrison's voice boomed over the gymnasium's PA system, echoing harshly off the bleachers. "There is 0 tolerance for academic dishonesty. If you are caught communicating, looking at another student's paper, or utilizing unauthorized materials, your exam will be confiscated. You will receive a 0, and you will face immediate expulsion. Do I make myself perfectly clear?" A murmur of yes, sir, rippled through the sea of students. "You may break the seals on your booklets," he announced. "Begin." The collective sound of 300 paper seals tearing was like the rushing of wind. I opened my booklet. I didn't reach for the pen yet. I picked up a yellow pencil. In my past life, I had studied for this exam with a desperation that bordered on madness. Combined with my adult mind and the fact that I had already taken this exact test once, the questions looking back at me weren't just familiar, they were transparent. I moved through the first section, reading comprehension and logic with brutal efficiency. It was almost relaxing. I bubbled in the Scantron sheet rhythmically, letting the familiar cadence of academic focus wash over me. 30 minutes passed. I paused, stretching my neck, and shifted my gaze to Minna. She was currently working on the same section. Her posture was perfect, her pencil moving steadily. The first hour of the National Merit Exam was designed to be accessible. It lulled you into a false sense of security. It was the second hour, the advanced mathematics and quantum physics section, that acted as the great filter, designed to break even the top percentile. I knew Minna's academic limits. She was smart, undeniably so, but she wasn't a prodigy. She lacked the abstract reasoning required for the deep-level physics and the advanced calculus. That was where she needed her crutch. That was where the smart pen was supposed to save her. At the 1-hour mark, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The rustling of pages slowed down. You could physically feel the collective brain power of the room, hitting a brick wall as students turned the page to section 3. Sighs of despair began to pop up around the room, like tiny suppressed detonations. I watched Minna turn to section 3. I saw her shoulders stiffened. She stared at the page for a full 2 minutes without moving. The equations staring back at her were monstrous, multivariable nightmares. Thankfully, casually, Minna placed her yellow pencil down. She reached into her clear pouch and withdrew the black and silver Montblanc. A cold smile touched my lips. I picked up my own Montblanc, the dummy replica, uncapped it, and began to write out a complex proof on my scratch paper. Minna held the pen. I watched her thumb find the silver band in the middle of the barrel. With the practiced subtle movement, she twisted the top half of the pen exactly 45 degrees. She tilted it slightly, angling the tiny viewing window toward her eyes, expecting the micro LED screen to light up with the preloaded answers she had spent weeks programming. Nothing happened. I could see her brow furrow. She twisted it back to the starting position, then twisted it again, harder this time. Still nothing. It was, after all, just a normal ink cartridge inside. Minna's posture broke. The rigid, perfect line of her spine slumped slightly. She brought the pen closer to her face, hiding the movement behind her left hand as if she were resting her forehead. She twisted the barrel back and forth, back and forth. Click, click, click. The tiny metallic sounds were inaudible to the proctors over the hum of the AC. But to me, they were the opening notes of a beautiful symphony. Panic is a physical thing. It doesn't start in the mind. It starts in the nervous system. I watched the exact moment the panic hit Minna Carmichael's bloodstream. Her hands began to tremble. It was a fine, fast vibration that made the silver clip of the pen blur slightly under the harsh lights. She dropped the pen onto the desk. It landed with a heavy clack that caused the student next to her to shoot her and annoyed glare. She stared at the pen as if it had transformed into a venomous snake. She reached into her pouch, frantically pushing the erasers and pencils aside, looking for what? Another pen. A backup. There was nothing else. Her breathing hitched. Even from 2 rows back, I could see the erratic rise and fall of her chest. She grabbed her pencil again and turned back to the test booklet. She stared at a calculus problem. She pressed the graphite to the scratch paper. Snap! The pencil lead broke under the sheer force of her terrified grip. She let out a tiny stifled gasp. She was drowning. She was sitting in the middle of the most important exam of her life, staring at a foreign language she couldn't read, and her life vest was gone. The valedictorian crown, the Stanford acceptance, her perfect image, it was all evaporating before her eyes, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. She couldn't raise her hand and complain that her cheating device was broken. She couldn't walk out without forfeiting. She was trapped in a cage of her own making. Then, slowly, as if pulled by an invisible string, Minna turned her head. She looked over her left shoulder, past the rows of furiously working students, and her eyes locked dead onto mine. Her face was pale, stripped of all its haughty beauty. A thin sheen of cold sweat glistened on her forehead. Her eyes were wide, silently screaming, a mixture of confusion and absolute terror. I didn't look away. I held her gaze. I let the cold, dead expression on my face communicate everything words couldn't. Slowly, deliberately, I raised my right hand. I held up the silver and black Montblanc she had given me. I gave it a tiny, mocking wiggle. Then, maintaining eye contact, I clicked the cap, lowered it to my paper, and effortlessly solved a differential equation. The blood completely drained from Minna's face. She understood, in that fraction of a second, the horrifying reality crashed down upon her. I wasn't just working. I knew. I had known all along. I had outplayed her. She whipped her head back around, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. The exam had 2 hours left, 2 hours of agonizing, inescapable torture for her, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. But the real show was going to start when Mr. Agonize. Harrison checked his email. The digital clock, mounted on the far wall of the gymnasium, ticked over to the 2-hour mark. 11 a.m. Outside, the promised thunderstorm finally broke, rain lashing against the high frosted windows like handfuls of gravel. Inside, the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Natalie was unraveling. From my vantage point to Rose behind her, I watched the valedictorian of Oak Ridge Academy systematically fall apart. Her perfectly manicured fingernails were bitten down to the quick. She had erased a single section of her scratch paper so violently that she had torn a hole straight through the page. She kept casting terrified, frantic glances at the dummy Montblanc pen sitting uselessly on her desk, the pen I had seamlessly swapped out during homeroom. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, but it held no micro-LED screen, no preloaded formulas, no salvation. She was drowning in the advanced mathematics section, and the water was rising fast. Then, the heavy double doors at the back of the gymnasium swung open with a hollow, booming thud. The sound was so abrupt that several students physically jumped. I didn't. I had been waiting for this exact moment. I kept my eyes glued to my test booklet, but my peripheral vision tracked every movement. Principal Evans, a man who usually never left his plush office during exam week, marched into the room. His face was the color of bruised plum. Trailing closely behind him was Mr. Caldwell, our head invigilator. Principal Evans leaned in, whispering something urgently into Mr. Caldwell's ear while thrusting an open tablet screen toward him. Mr. Caldwell's eyes widened. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over the sea of bent heads like a hawk spotting prey. And then, his eyes locked onto my section of the grid. Here we go. The anonymous tip. In my previous life, Natalie had scheduled a delayed email from a burner account to hit the school administration's inbox exactly 1 hour into the exam. It detailed exactly where I was sitting, the specific make and model of the pen, and the 4-5-degree twist required to activate the screen. It was a flawless execution. I watched as Mr. Caldwell's heavy footsteps echoed against the polished hardwood, thump, thump, thump. He was walking straight down aisle C, straight toward me. Ahead of me, I saw Natalie's spine snap rigid. She stopped breathing. She knew the footsteps were coming from Eero. A sickening, desperate hope flared in her posture. She thought her plan was still going to work. She thought that somehow, despite me knowing about the pen, the administration would still drag me out and expel me, leaving her to blindly guess her way through the rest of the exam safe from my competition. Mr. Caldwell stopped directly beside my desk. The surrounding students froze, their pencils hovering above their scantrons. Stand up, Mr. Caldwell commanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that carried through the silent hall. I looked up, blinking and perfectly feigned confusion. Sir, is there a problem? Step away from the desk, he ordered, gesturing sharply. I stood up slowly, keeping my hands visible, and took a step back. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Natalie turn her head slightly, her eyes wide with malicious anticipation. Mr. Caldwell didn't look at my test paper. He reached directly into my clear plastic regulation pouch and pulled out the silver and black Montblanc pen, the dummy replica. We received a highly detailed anonymous communication regarding this specific writing instrument, Mr. Caldwell stated loudly, making sure the surrounding rose, making sure Natalie could hear him. It alleged that you are in possession of a digital cheating device disguised as a Montblanc Meisterstück. A collective gasp rippled through the nearest desks. Leo, sitting 1 row over, looked like he was about to pass out from shock. A cheating device? I asked, my voice steady, laced with just the right amount of polite indignation. Sir, it's just a pen. It was a gift, Mr. Caldwell ignored me. He held the pen up to the harsh fluorescent lights. He gripped the top half of the resin barrel and twisted it exactly 45 degrees, just as the anonymous email instructed. Nothing happened. No click, no glowing screen. Just the smooth, silent resistance of a standard ink cartridge housing. He frowned, his thick eyebrows knitting together. He twisted it the other way. He pulled the cap off. He unscrewed the barrel completely, letting the standard, blue ink cartridge drop into his palm. It was utterly, undeniably ordinary. I don't understand, Mr. Caldwell muttered, staring at the disassembled pieces of plastic and metal. He looked back at the tablet Principal Evans was holding. The email was incredibly specific. I let a beat of heavy silence hang in the air before I delivered the first fatal blow. Mr. Caldwell, I said, projecting my voice clearly. I would never cheat. As I said, that pen was a good luck gift. I received it just this morning. A gift. Principal Evans stepped forward, his eyes narrowing, from whom I slowly turned my head, locking eyes with the valedictorian to rows ahead. The malicious anticipation on her face had entirely vanished, replaced by a hollow, paralyzing dread. "From Natalie," I said clearly. She handed it to me in the hallway, right before homeroom. Leo saw the whole thing. All eyes in the gymnasium shifted from me to Natalie. 300 pairs of eyes, plus the principal and the head proctor bearing down on her. "Miss Carmichael," Principal Evans called out, his tone shifting from accusatory to bewildered. "Is this true? Did you give this pen to him?" Natalie stood up. Her legs were visibly shaking, knocking against the metal frame of her desk. The pristine, untouchable Queen of Oak Ridge looked like a cornered animal. I, she stammered, her voice cracking. "Yes, I gave it to him. It was just a nice gesture, a graduation gift. I have absolutely no idea what this anonymous email is about." She was lying, and she was doing it poorly. The panic was overriding her usually flawless acting skills. She sounded shrill, defensive. If it was just a nice gesture, I interjected smoothly, addressing Mr. Caldwell, but keeping my eyes on Natalie. Then why did the anonymous tip come in right after she gave it to me? A tip that specifically described the pen she bought. "I didn't send an email," Natalie shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "I've been sitting here taking my test." "That's true," Principal Evans noted, looking at his tablet. "The email was sent from an external IP address, likely a burner device 20 minutes ago. No student has access to their phones in here." "Exactly," Natalie gasped, clutching her chest as if she had just been thrown a life preserver. "It's a setup. Someone is trying to frame him or frame me." "But Mr. Caldwell," keeping my tone helpful and concerned, "there's something else." During homeroom, Natalie was acting very erratic. When you stepped out to speak with the principal, she came over to my desk. She dropped her things, and when I helped her pick them up, I noticed she had another Montblanc pen, one that looked identical to this one. She seemed incredibly protective of it. It was a slight manipulation of the truth, a masterclass in misdirection. I hadn't just noticed her pen. I had swapped them, but the administration didn't need to know that. They just needed a reason to look. "Mr. Caldwell's head snapped toward Natalie. The suspicion in his eyes, previously directed at me, was now a laser beam focused entirely on her. "Miss Carmichael, Mr. Caldwell," said, his voice dropping an octave into a tone of absolute authority. "In your clear regulation pouch and step into the aisle no." The word tore out of her throat before she could stop it. It was the absolute worst thing she could have said. It was the visceral, unfiltered reaction of a guilty conscience. The entire gymnasium inhaled sharply. "Excuse me." Principal Evans stepped forward, his face hardening into granite. "I mean, I don't have another pen." Natalie backpedaled frantically, her face flushing crimson. "He's lying. I only had the yellow pencils." "You can check. Then you won't mind stepping into the aisle." "Mr. Caldwell," said coldly, defeated, trembling so hard she could barely walk. Natalie shuffled out from behind her desk. She clutched her clear plastic pouch to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Caldwell held out his hand. Reluctantly, she handed it over. Through the clear plastic, everyone could see the two yellow pencils, the pink eraser and the dummy Montblanc she had been fruitlessly trying to activate for the last hour. "Mr. Caldwell unzipped the pouch. He pulled out the dummy Montblanc. He tried twisting it. "Nothing. Just like mine." Natalie let out a shaky, hysterical breath of relief. "See? I told you. It's just a normal pen. He's making things up to sabotage me." She thought she had survived. She thought the nightmare was over. She had completely underestimated the depth of my revenge. "Sir," I said softly, cutting through her triumphant relief. "If someone was going to bring a cheating device into the exam, they wouldn't leave it in the main compartment of the clear pouch where the proctors could see it, would they?" "Mr. Caldwell paused. He looked at the plastic pouch in his hands. It was a standard-issue Oak Ridge exam pouch, which meant it had a small, opaque canvas lining at the very bottom, meant for storing ID cards and emergency lunch money. Slowly, deliberately, Mr. Caldwell slid his fingers into the bottom canvas fold of Natalie's pouch. Natalie's face went entirely slack. Her eyes dilated in absolute, unadulterated horror. She knew exactly what was in there, because during my sleight of hand in homeroom, I hadn't just taken her rigged pen. I had unzipped her pouch, dropped the rigged pen into that opaque canvas fold, and left the dummy pen in the clear section. Mr. Caldwell's fingers closed around something solid. He pulled it out. It was a third Montblanc pen, silver trim, black resin, identical to the others. The silence in the room was so absolute, you could hear the rain hitting the roof 100 feet above us. Mr. Caldwell held the third pen in his hand. He didn't look at me, and he didn't look at Natalie. He looked at the email, pulled up on the principal's tablet. He gripped the barrel. He twisted it exactly 45 degrees. There was a faint, almost imperceptible click. Suddenly, a tiny, high-resolution micro-LED screen illuminated from within the black resin casing. In the dim, storm-shadowed light of the gymnasium, the blue glow of the hidden screen was unmistakably bright. Scrolling across the tiny display were complex, perfectly formatted quantum physics equations and calculus proofs. Section 3 of the National Merit Exam. "My God," Principal Evans whispered, staring at the glowing device. "No," Natalie breathed. It was a hollow, broken sound. Her knees finally gave out, and she collapsed onto the polished wooden floor, her designer skirt pooling around her. "No, no, no, that's not mine. He planted it. He put it there." She pointed a shaking finger at me, tears streaming down her flawlessly powdered face, leaving ugly, jagged streaks of mascara. "He's trying to ruin me." I looked down at her, my face a mask of mild shock and profound disappointment. But inside, my blood was singing a dark, victorious hymn. "Natalie," I said gently, ensuring my voice carried the perfect pitch of a betrayed friend. "Why would I plant a cheating device with the answers to Section 3? I finished Section 3 20 minutes ago. You're the one who has been stuck on it for the last hour." It was the final nail in the coffin, a purely logical, devastating observation. "Mr." Caldwell looked at her exam booklet on the desk. It was opened to Section 3. The page was blank, saved for the tear mark from her frantic erasing. He then looked at my desk. My Scantron was filled out perfectly, smoothly, confidently. Furthermore, Principal Evans said, his voice laced with absolute disgust, "If he planted it to frame you, why did the anonymous tip direct us to his desk? The tip was designed to get him caught, but the device was in your bag." The administration wasn't stupid. They were putting the pieces together. The only logical conclusion was the truth. Natalie had bought the device, planned to use it, but had somehow gotten scared or made a mistake, resulting in a mix-up with the pens. She had tried to frame me to eliminate her only academic rival, but her own trap had snapped shut on her leg. "Miss Carmichael, Mr." Caldwell said, his voice devoid of any warmth or sympathy. "Your exam is hereby confiscated. You are to receive an automatic 0. You will gather your belongings and accompany Principal Evans and me to the disciplinary office immediately. We will be contacting your parents and the universities to which you have applied. Please," Natalie sobbed, crawling forward and grabbing the hem of Mr. Caldwell's slacks. "Please, you don't understand. My parents, Stanford, it's ruined. Everything is ruined. You ruined it yourself," Evans said coldly, stepping back from her grasp. "Get up." 2 assistant proctors had to physically help her to her feet. She was a sobbing, hyperventilating mess. As they marched her down the long central aisle of the gymnasium, the students parted for her, pulling their desks away as if she were carrying a plague. As she passed my row, she locked eyes with me one last time. Behind the tears, behind the absolute devastation, there was a flash of pure, terrified realization. She looked at the cold, unapologetic emptiness in my eyes and finally understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't bad luck. She had tried to bury me, but she didn't realize I had already been in the grave, and I knew exactly how to dig my way out. The heavy gymnasium doors slammed shut behind her, cutting off her sobs. "Mr." Caldwell walked to the front of the room, taking a deep, shuddering breath to compose himself. "The exam will resume. You will all receive an additional 15 minutes to compensate for the disruption. Focus on your papers." I sat back down in my chair. I picked up my yellow pencil. The digital clock ticked forward. The air in the room felt lighter. The oppressive, suffocating weight of my past life had been lifted, carried out those double doors on the shoulders of the girl who had built it. I looked down at the remaining physics equations. They were beautiful in their simplicity. I had secured my future, but more importantly, I had balanced the scales. The storm outside raged on, but it was nothing compared to the tempest brewing inside Principal Evans' office. 2 hours after the exam concluded, I was summoned to the administrative wing. When I pushed open the heavy oak door, the room was suffocatingly tense. Natalie sat rigidly in a leather chair. her eyes swollen and red, staring vacantly at her own trembling hands. Standing behind her, radiating the kind of arrogant fury that only obscene wealth can buy, was her father, Mr. Carmichael. He was a titan of corporate real estate, a billionaire who treated Oak Ridge Academy like his personal philanthropy project. Sitting opposite them was my father. He wore his grease-stained work boots and a faded flannel shirt, a stark contrast to Carmichael's bespoke Italian suit. But my dad's spine was permanently straightened by 20 years in the Marines. He sat with a quiet, immovable dignity that made the billionaire look like a petulant child throwing a tantrum. "This is an absolute witch hunt, Evans." "Mr. Carmichael bellowed, slamming his palm on the mahogany desk. "My daughter is an exemplary student. She is valedictorian. You're telling me you're going to destroy her life over some magic trick performed by this mechanic's kid?" He shot a venomous glare in my direction. I didn't flinch. I took the empty seat next to my father, who placed a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Carmichael, please lower your voice," Principal Evans said, though his tone betrayed a hint of intimidation. He gestured to the 3 identical Montblanc pens laid out on his desk like murder weapons. "The facts are undeniable. The device was found concealed in the hidden lining of Natalie's personal pouch. The anonymous email perfectly described how to activate it. He planted it," Natalie cried out, her voice raspy. "He bumped into my desk during homeroom. I swear, Daddy, he set me up." "Mr. Carmichael sneered. "There you have it. The boy has a motive. He knew he couldn't beat her honestly, so he resorted to sabotage. We will be pressing charges for defamation, emotional distress, and theft. My legal team is already drafting the injunction." For a moment, in my past life, this was exactly the kind of power that had crushed me, the sheer weight of capital and influence. But I wasn't the scared 18-year-old anymore. I had the advantage of absolute foresight. "Actually, Mr. Carmichael," I spoke up, my voice steady and polite, cutting through his bluster. "If you check the timestamps, your daughter handed me the gift pen at 8:15 a.m. The anonymous tip was sent at 9:45 a.m. If I planted the cheating device on her, why would the email specifically instruct the proctors to search my desk?" Carmichael's jaw tightened, a poorly executed frame job. "You clearly panicked." "Or Mr. Caldwell interjected, stepping out from the shadows near the filing cabinets, holding a thick manila folder. "We can look at the digital footprint." Mr. Caldwell, the head proctor, had zero patience for wealthy parents throwing their weight around. He dropped the folder onto the desk. "We contacted the local cybercrimes precinct, as per the Academy's zero-tolerance policy on academic fraud." Caldwell stated coldly. The anonymous email was sent via a masked IP, but the service provider was routed through a local cellular tower. They traced the MAC address of the device used to send the email. The color drained entirely from Natalie's face. She looked like she was going to be sick. "The device," Caldwell continued, tapping the folder, "is a prepaid burner phone, purchased 2 weeks ago at an electronics store, 3 miles from your gated community, Mr. Carmichael. Purchased using a platinum credit card registered to a Natalie Carmichael." The silence that followed was deafening. The bluster instantly evaporated from the billionaire's posture. He looked down at his daughter. "Natalie," he whispered, his voice suddenly sharp and dangerous. "Did you use my auxiliary card to buy a phone?" She shrank into the leather chair. Her silence, a damning confession. "She bought the burner phone to send the tip, ensuring I would be searched and expelled," I said smoothly, twisting the knife. "But she made a fatal error. She accidentally kept the rigged pen and gave me the normal one. When the proctors searched me and found nothing, they searched her and found the truth. It's not a framed job. It's just poetic justice." My father finally spoke, his voice carrying the low, gravely authority of a commanding officer. "I believe this meeting is over. Come on, son. Let's go home." We stood up. As I walked out the door, I glanced back. The billionaire wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at his daughter with a look of absolute unforgiving disgust. The empire she had built on lies was burning to the ground, and there was no one left to put out the flames. The days following the National Merit Exam transformed the hallowed, ivy-draped halls of Oak Ridge Academy into a theater of paranoia and judgment. Gossip is a living, breathing entity in high school. But this was different. This wasn't a passing rumor about a stolen kiss behind the bleachers. This was the systematic, public dismantling of a dynasty. The administration tried to keep it quiet initially, attempting to wrap the investigation in thick layers of bureaucratic red tape. Mr. Carmichael, true to his nature as a corporate apex predator, launched a silent but terrifying offensive. He threatened aggressive lawsuits, promised to withdraw his massive endowments, and even floated the idea of fully funding an entirely new robotics laboratory if the misunderstanding regarding the rigged Montblanc pen was handled internally and permanently scrubbed from the official academic record. In my previous life, that exact brand of financial intimidation had been the very thing that paved over my grave. I knew exactly how the wealthy operated. They believed truth was just another commodity that could be purchased at a premium. But I was not the naive boy who had died in the freezing river. I was reborn, and I had planned for the billionaire's bluff. Knowing that money often spoke louder than morality, I had taken out an insurance policy. During the chaos of the police tracing the burner phone's MAC address to Natalie's platinum credit card, I had used an encrypted proxy server to anonymously forward the preliminary police incident report, along with a perfectly time-stamped summary of the physical evidence found inside her concealed exam pouch, directly to the inbox of every single member of the Oak Ridge Parent-Teacher Association, the school board of directors, and 3 prominent local journalists. The resulting explosion was spectacular. By Tuesday morning, the school board was drowning in outraged phone calls from furious parents who refused to let their own children's class rankings be jeopardized to protect a billionaire's cheating daughter. The administration's hands were tied. There could be no cover-up when the exact blueprint of the academic fraud was printed on the front page of the Oak Ridge Tribune. The Carmichael money had finally met an immovable object: public humiliation. On Thursday, the official decree came down from Principal Evans' office. The valedictorian title was formally stripped. Her exam results were completely annulled, and her acceptance to Stanford was permanently revoked, citing a severe, unforgivable breach of academic integrity. That afternoon, I stood by my locker, organizing my textbooks when the atmosphere in the corridor suddenly turned as rigid as glass. The usual cacophony of slamming metal doors and teenage laughter evaporated into a suffocating dead silence. Natalie was walking down the hall. She wasn't flanked by her usual sycophantic entourage. She was entirely alone. The pristine, untouchable queen of Oak Ridge looked like a ghost haunting her own castle. Her designer blazer was rumpled. Her face was completely devoid of its flawless makeup, and her eyes were fixed firmly on the polished linoleum floor. She was holding a cardboard box, slowly emptying the contents of her locker. The student body, people who had worshipped her just a week prior, parted around her as if she were carrying a highly contagious plague. Nobody made eye contact. The social isolation was absolute and brutal. As she closed her locker for the final time, she turned and saw me standing 20 feet away. For a fleeting second, the old venomous Natalie flickered in her eyes, a dying ember of pure, unadulterated hatred. She took a step toward me, her knuckles turning white around the edges of her cardboard box. Her lips parted, perhaps to hurl one last desperate threat, or to scream that I had ruined her life. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply tilted my head, offering a look of complete, chilling apathy. It was the look you give a stray dog on the side of the highway. Not pity, not anger, just nothing. That absolute void of emotion broke her. The anger drained from her face, leaving behind a hollow, devastating realization. She was nothing to me. She had brought a knife to a gunfight against someone who had already survived the apocalypse. Her shoulders slumped. She broke eye contact, and she hurried toward the exit, disappearing into the heavy afternoon rain. She was formally expelled the following morning. Graduation day arrived in late June, bathed in the kind of golden, radiant sunlight that felt like a personal blessing from the universe. The football field was transformed into a sea of folding chairs, nervous parents, and students wearing navy blue robes. The Principal Evans called my name to deliver the valedictorian address. The applause rolled over the field like thunder. I adjusted the gold, stole around my neck, the heavy, tangible proof of my victory, and stepped up to the wooden podium. I looked out at the crowd, my eyes finding my father in the third row. He was wearing his best suit, a little worn at the elbows, but his posture was ramrod straight. The sheer, overwhelming pride radiating from his face made my chest tighten. In my past life, this day had been marked by his profound shame, by a silence so heavy it eventually crushed our family. We are often defined not by the tests we take on paper, but by the unseen choices we make in the shadows. I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing clearly across the stadium. The sky is not a garment you wear for applause. It is the foundation upon which true success is built. Today, we step into the light, entirely the architects of our own destinies. The speech wasn't a gloat, it was a testament to survival. When I stepped down, the standing ovation was deafening. The golden boy had claimed his rightful crown. But true, karmic justice isn't merely about personal ascension. It is about witnessing the scales balance perfectly. A week after graduation, Leo and I were driving across town in my beat-up sedan. The stifling summer heat radiated off the asphalt. We pulled into the cracked, weed-choked parking lot of Rusty's Diner, a neon-lit joint on the edge of the city limits that smelled perpetually of old frying oil bleach and stale coffee. He grabbed a booth in the back corner, the red vinyl seats patched with silver duct tape. Man, I still can't believe the Carmichael empire collapsed that fast. Leo mused, browsing the sticky, laminated menu, wiping a smudge of grease off the corner. Rumor is, her dad completely cut her off to save face, refused to pay a dime for a private tutor or a safety school, told her she had to learn the value of $1 the hard way since she burned his reputation to the ground. Actions have consequences. Leo, I replied quietly, tracing the rim of my empty water glass. Some debts just have higher interest rates. Are you guys ready to order? The voice was flat, exhausted, and devoid of any light. I looked up, standing by our table, holding a scalding hot coffee pot, and wearing a stained, heavily starched pink waitress uniform was Natalie. Her cascading blonde hair, once her crowning glory, was tied back in a messy, practical bun secured with a cheap plastic claw. Her fingernails, usually impeccably manicured, were chipped and raw from industrial dish soap. She looked incredibly small, defeated, completely stripped of her armor. And she recognized us, she froze entirely. The heavy glass coffee pot in her hand trembled. A flush of deep, agonizing humiliation crept up her neck, turning her face scarlet. Her eyes darted wildly, like a trapped animal looking for an exit that didn't exist. In my previous life, she had handed me an executioner's blade, disguised as a gift, and watched me bleed out without a second thought. She had left me to rot in a greasy garage while she prepared to rule the world. Now, the universe had flipped the board. "Just 2 black coffees, please," I said, my voice perfectly polite, level, and entirely businesslike. I offered no mocking smirk, no arrogant sneer. Pity would have been an insult. Complete apathy was the true final execution. She swallowed hard, her chest heaving as she tried to suppress a sob. "Right away," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the words. As she turned to hurry back to the counter, her foot caught on the curled edge of a ripped floor mat. She bumped violently against the swinging kitchen door. A stack of thick ceramic saucers she had been balancing on her serving tray slipped from her grip, shattering onto the grease-stained linoleum with a loud, violent crash. "Carmichael, you're paying for those out of your tips," the diner manager bellowed from behind the grill, flipping a burger with loud, performative disgust. Natalie dropped to her knees. Her shoulders shook violently as she frantically began sweeping up the broken shards with her bare, trembling hands, tears finally spilling over her cheeks and splashing onto the dirty floor. I watched her for a long, silent moment. The ghost of my past life, the heavy, suffocating weight of the freezing river water, finally released its grip on my soul. The scales were balanced. The debt was paid in full. I turned back to Leo, opening my menu. "So, what are you getting?" The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was a masterclass in climate control, a stark and welcome contrast to the suffocating, humid, August heat radiating off the New York asphalt outside. The sprawling, high-voltage concourse smelled of freshly roasted espresso, beauty-free designer perfume, and the faint underlying chemical tang of aviation fuel. To anyone else, it was just the chaotic scent of international travel. To me, it was the unmistakable scent of absolute freedom. My father had dropped me off at the departure curb just 20 minutes prior. For a man whose emotional spectrum usually ranged from stoic silence to quiet, approving nods, his farewell had been jarringly profound. He had pulled me into a fierce, bone-crushing embrace. His calloused hands, hands that had worked double shifts at the municipal shipping yards just to keep a roof over our heads, gripping my shoulders like vise grips. "You earned this," he had whispered, his voice thick with a heavy, unshed pride. "You made your own luck, son. Don't ever look back." In my previous life, those exact same hands had identified my body at the county morgue. The memory was a lingering ghost that still occasionally haunted the absolute edges of my peripheral vision. A freezing phantom of a timeline I had successfully and ruthlessly assassinated. But standing there with my Ivy League acceptance letter secured in my carry-on, walking toward a fully funded future at Cambridge, the ghost finally dissolved into nothingness. I pulled my rolling luggage past the chaotic, snaking security lines, navigating the sea of rushing travelers with a profound sense of calm. I checked the massive digital departure board towering over the central atrium. My flight was boarding at Gate 42, located in the premium wing of the concourse. As I walked down the long, carpeted corridor, my path forced me to pass by the budget airline terminals. These gates were crowded, chaotic, and lacked the polished veneer of the upper-tier lounges. The air here smelled heavily of cheap, fast food, and exhausted frustration. And there she was. Natalie was sitting entirely alone in a row of hard, unforgiving plastic chairs near Gate 12. She was wearing plain gray sweatpants and a faded, oversized college hoodie that offered no specific allegiance. Her luggage consisted of a single, battered canvas duffel bag resting at her feet. There were no pristine leather totes. There was no sycophantic entourage hanging onto her every word. There was no billionaire father standing by to ensure she received priority boarding. I instinctively slowed my pace, the wheels of my suitcase gliding silently to a halt. She looked up, perhaps sensing the shift in the crowd's momentum, or perhaps drawn by the sheer gravitational pull of our shared bitter history. Our eyes locked over the distance of the bustling terminal. For a long, suspended moment, the deafening noise of the airport seemed to fade into a dull, white static. I looked at her closely. The arrogant, untouchable queen who had effortlessly commanded the halls of Oak Ridge Academy was completely gone. Her face was pale, designed of the expensive cosmetics she used to wear like war paint. Her posture was curled inward, defensive and defeated. She was waiting to board a budget flight to a strict, disciplinary boarding program in a rural Midwestern state. A last-ditch, desperate effort by her disgraced family to quietly sweep her under the rug and force her to rebuild her destroyed academic transcript far away from polite society. She opened her mouth. Her lips trembled slightly. I don't know if she intended to offer a hollow apology or perhaps hurl one final, bitter insult born from her sheer misery, but no sound materialized. The fight had been entirely bled out of her. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat, nor did I offer a mocking wave. The burning, white-hot rage that had fueled my entire rebirth, the anger that had sustained me through the meticulous planning, and the ruthless execution of my revenge was suddenly gone. Looking at her, I felt nothing but a profound, chilling apathy. She was no longer a terrifying apex predator. She was no longer a threat. She was just a broken girl who had played an incredibly cruel game and lost everything she held dear. I gave her a single, definitive nod, an acknowledgement of our past and a permanent severing of our future. Then I turned my back to her and walked away, never casting a single glance over my shoulder. Now boarding first class and Diamond Medallion members for Flight 802 to Boston, the intercom crackled to life, the gate agent's voice echoing clearly. I handed my digital boarding pass to Gate Agent Peterson. The scanner emitted a cheerful, melodic chime. "Have a wonderful flight, sir." He smiled. I walked down the insulated jet bridge, the heavy, humid air briefly returning before giving way to the crisp, climate-controlled cabin of the Boeing 777. I found my plush window seat, strapped myself in, and looked out the oval glass at the sprawling, sun-drenched tarmac. The massive engines roared to life, a deafening, magnificent symphony of raw, unadulterated power. We taxied to the runway, the speed building rapidly, the intense G-force pushing me back deep into the leather seat. And then, with a breathless, weightless leap, the wheels severed their connection with the earth. I was finally flying. The sharp, metallic click of a luxury pen. In my first life, it was the sound of my execution. In this life, it was the sound of a cage unlocking. As the airplane broke through the heavy cloud cover, ascending into the brilliant, blinding blue of the stratosphere, I finally let out a breath. I felt I had been holding for 2 lifetimes. The cold, desperate fear of the auto shop and the icy bridge was gone, replaced by the limitless horizon stretching out before me. I had been handed a rigged game, but instead of folding, I rewrote the rules. I didn't just survive the venomous bite of a snake. I extracted the poison and handed it right back. Looking down at the patchwork of cities and roads shrinking below, I realized the ultimate truth. Destiny isn't a pre-written test. It's a blank page waiting for the right pen.